The auction yard reeked of sweat, old hay, and the kind of hopelessness that clung to rusted metal and broken spirits. It was the kind of place where dreams were bartered in hushed murmurs and desperate hands. Under the blistering noon sun, livestock shuffled in pens, their eyes wide, their fates already sealed. But at the far end, beyond the murmuring crowd and cracked fencing, stood a cage no one dared to approach. Inside, it sat an old bear. Its fur was matted and patchy, gray threading through black like ash smeared across coal. Scars marred its muzzle. One ear looked like it had been partially torn off, and its right paw dragged slightly as it moved. But what unsettled people the most weren't the wounds. It was the eyes. The bear didn't pace like the others. It didn't growl or lunge at curious passers-by. It just stared, straight ahead, at something, or someone, no one else could see. "They should put it down," muttered a man near the hay bales, spitting into the dirt. "Ain't good for anything." "Useless heap of fur," another scoffed. "Bet it don't last the winter." Daniel heard them all, but he couldn't take his eyes off the creature. He stood at a distance, clutching the auction sheet in one hand, pretending to study the livestock lots. But it was a lie. His boots hadn't moved in minutes. There was something wrong with that bear, but also something familiar. He blinked. A memory slipped in like smoke under a door. Blurry, fragmented, a boy, the forest, a sudden drop into a ravine, and then eyes, not human, watching, protecting. Daniel shook his head hard and turned to walk away. But then the bear turned too, slowly, deliberately, and locked eyes with him. The breath caught in Daniel's throat. His stomach sank like he'd just heard something spoken in a language he didn't understand, but still recognized. The connection was instantaneous, unexplainable, and terrifying in its intensity. "Lot 47, the auctioneer barked, slamming a gavel. "Old mountain bear, former circus stock maybe, injured, likely malnourished. Let's start low. Who'll give 10? Silence. $10 for a bear, folks, less than a sack of feed." The bear didn't move, neither did Daniel. 5? 2? Someone laughed, and then Daniel's voice cut through. 10. The auctioneer hesitated. The crowd turned. A few gasped. "Sold," the gavel cracked. "To the fool in the hat." Laughter rolled like thunder. "Have fun with that corpse," someone called. Daniel walked forward, ignoring them all. The bear didn't flinch as he approached. It simply stood, stepped forward once, and let out the faintest huff. Not a warning, something closer to relief. Back at the farm, Eliza was less amused. "You did what?" "I bought the bear." "With what money, Daniel?" she snapped, slamming down a dish. "The barn roof leaks, the tractor won't start, and we haven't paid the feed supplier in 2 weeks. And you bring home a bear?" Daniel rubbed his temples. "I don't know why. I just had to." Eliza stared at him like she didn't recognize the man in front of her. "It's not staying in the house." "I didn't say it would. And if it hurts the dogs, it won't." She crossed her arms. "You're sure about that?" "No," Daniel said quietly, "but I don't think it's here to hurt anything." They put the bear in the old horse pen, reinforced with iron panels and double latches. Daniel stayed up most of the night watching it, sitting on a stool outside the fence, nursing lukewarm coffee while the bear sat motionless, eyes fixed on the eastern ridgeline. It was the same the next morning, and the one after that. At dawn and dusk, the bear would rise slowly, shuffle to the edge of the pen, and stare at the mountains, always in the same direction. When Daniel fed it, it ate without complaint but never rushed. It didn't growl or bare its teeth, not even when the dogs barked or when kids from the neighboring farm tossed sticks at it from across the field. It simply existed, like it was waiting for something. Daniel noticed things. The bear avoided the barns entirely, even when the gate was left open. It flinched when he picked up an old sickle, though he hadn't moved toward it. When he said, "Stay," The bear did. When he whistled, it turned its head, but he'd never trained it. No one had. It responded with eerie precision, not like a pet, but like a soldier following orders it already knew. One evening, Eliza stood with him at the fence, her arms folded tight. "It doesn't act like a bear." "No." "Doesn't smell like one either," she muttered. "I mean, not like wild ones." Daniel looked at her. She shrugged. "You live with animals long enough, you notice things. This one, it feels wrong." He didn't answer. They stood in silence as the sun sank behind the hills, throwing gold across the sky. The bear stood tall, just beyond the shadows, its eyes locked again on that same ridge. And in the fading light, Daniel thought he saw something flicker in its eyes. Not fear, not hunger, but memory. Old, aching memory. The days passed. Then a week. Daniel began sketching in his journal, something he hadn't done since childhood. The bear, the ridge, symbols he remembered from his dreams. He didn't know why. He just couldn't stop. One morning, he left a hammer by the fence after fixing a broken panel. When he returned hours later, the hammer was moved. Placed perfectly upright against the gate, balanced delicately, impossibly, on its head. He didn't tell Eliza. She'd started sleeping with a flashlight under her pillow. That night, as the stars blinked awake in the sky, Daniel stood alone outside the pen, staring at the silent creature within. "I don't know what you..." was still latched from the outside. Daniel's blood ran cold. By morning, the ground near the well was clawed raw. Deep grooves lined the edges where the bear had scratched through packed dirt and weed-ridden soil. The bear didn't look at Daniel as he approached. It simply sat back, heaving slow, mournful breaths, eyes fixed again on the stones. That evening it returned, dragging its paw across the well rim in long circles, then laying beside it with a low whine that sounded too human to dismiss as coincidence. Daniel stood over the well. Its stones were weathered, some chipped, others moss-covered, but beneath the grime something caught his eye. He wiped it clean with his sleeve. Symbols. Carved, shallow, nearly worn away. He crouched down, tracing them with his fingers. They weren't letters, at least not any he recognized. But they weren't random either. They looped, intertwined, formed sequences that felt deliberate, familiar. He pulled his old journal from his coat pocket and flipped to the sketches he hadn't understood weeks ago, drawn from fragments of dreams he barely remembered. The symbols matched, one for one. The bear stood behind him, silent. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. Every creak of the farmhouse felt louder, the shadows longer. He turned the pages of an old box of letters passed down from his grandfather. A yellowed envelope fell loose, sealed with wax, never opened. His grandfather's handwriting sprawled across the front. "To be read only if the well is disturbed." Hands trembling, Daniel broke the seal. Inside, a single page, scrawled in heavy ink. "Some things are buried for a reason, Daniel. The well was never just a well. I sealed it after the fire. After what I saw in the forest that night, if you value your soul, never dig it up. The guardian watches. The guardian remembers. The price for forgetting is always blood." Daniel sat frozen, the letter limp in his hands. A log cracked in the fireplace, but he didn't move. Outside, the bear moaned, long, low, echoing through the dark like a call to something far older than the farm, older than the village. In the morning, Daniel hitched his truck and drove to the edge of the valley to a shack barely standing under the weight of its own roof. "Don't get many visitors," said the old man on the porch. His eyes were sharp despite his age, glinting beneath brows like thorned branches. "You used to know my grandfather," Daniel said. "Emerson Vell." The old man nodded. "Knew him, feared him. Wise man. Broke-hearted, though. Never forgave himself." Daniel hesitated. "He warned me about the well." The hermit's face fell. "So it's waking up again." Daniel leaned forward. "What is?" The old man reached into a rusted trunk beside his chair and pulled out a worn, leather book. He flipped to the middle, an illustration sketched in charcoal, a towering bear, with runes spiraling around its legs, eyes glowing white. They called it the Guardian. Not an animal, not quite. Born of grief. Kept to protect something sacred, something no one was meant to touch. What was it guarding? No one knows. The tribe that bound it vanished. Some say they buried a star beneath the earth. Some say it was a punishment, something the gods themselves tried to lock away. The guardian was chosen to keep it sealed, until the last breath, until the last memory. Daniel swallowed. And then? The old man closed the book. And then it disappeared. 40 years ago, after the fire in the northern woods. Your grandfather said he saw it walk into the flames, and not burn. That night, the wolves came. Daniel had just stepped outside to gather firewood when he heard them. Low growls, crunching leaves, snarling. 6 of them, emerging from the woods like smoke, eyes gleaming, teeth bared. They didn't usually come this close to the house. Not in packs. Not like this. He froze. The bear stepped into the clearing. It didn't roar. It didn't lunge. It just stared. The wolves stopped. Every one of them. In unison. Their hackles rose, but they didn't move closer. The bear stepped forward once. No noise, no aggression, just that look, like it was reminding them of something older than hunger. One by one, the wolves backed away, then turned, then disappeared into the trees. Daniel didn't sleep that night either. The next morning, while replacing the hay in the pen, Daniel noticed something buried beneath the bedding, wedged under the thickest patch of straw. He pulled it out carefully. A pendant. Smooth, round, carved bone, strung on a frayed strip of leather. Etched across the face was a symbol from his dreams, one that hadn't appeared on the well, but had burned itself into his memory for weeks. The moment his fingers touched it, the metal warmed. Not just from the sun, from within. It pulsed. He held it up, and the bear, still lying near the far gate, growled low in its chest. A warning. The sound wasn't angry. It was protective. Desperate. Daniel lowered the pendant slowly. The bear rose and backed away, never taking its eyes off him. He couldn't explain why, but the pendant terrified him. Not because of what it was, but because it belonged to something that still remembered him, something that might be waking up. At twilight, Daniel stood again by the well, the pendant hanging from his fingers. The bear lingered behind him, pacing. "I didn't mean to find it," Daniel whispered. "You brought me here, didn't you?" The bear stopped, lowered its head, silent agreement. Daniel stared into the mouth of the well. The wind picked up, just a little, enough to make the trees whisper. The pendant swung in his hand, and then he slipped. Not his whole body, just his grip. The pendant dropped. It hit the stone rim, bounced once, twice, then fell. Down, down, into the dark. There was no splash, just silence. Then, tremor. So small at first, Daniel thought he imagined it. Then the earth truly shook. The stones around the well groaned. A few birds scattered from the trees. The sky shifted color. Not darker, not lighter, just wrong. And then came the roar. The bear rose on its hind legs and let out a sound unlike anything Daniel had ever heard. Not pain, not anger, warning. It was so loud the windows of the farmhouse shuddered. Every animal on the farm went still. The dogs whimpered, chickens froze. Even the air felt tighter. The roar echoed across the hills like a siren from beneath the soil itself. Daniel dropped to his knees, hands to his ears. The sound finally died. The bear collapsed onto all fours, breathing hard, foam at the edges of its mouth. Then it turned toward Daniel. And for the first time since the auction, it looked afraid.